What are some practical steps a Titus 2 woman mentoring a younger woman in the faith would teach? Well, for this section, I thought I would just take a page out of my wife's notebook. In fact, I actually did. When Bonnie and I were married, a godly older woman actually sat down and trained her because she came from a pagan background. Do you remember my wife? My wife was saved as a bartender. She was an alcoholic. Do y'all remember that? I've told it so many times. Did she know how to live a godly, spirit-energized life? Mm-mm. But when she got saved, a godly older woman sat down with her and said, this is God's standard. And after we got married and moved to California, one of the women in the church sat down and she would bring young ladies to her home one by one, and Bonnie was one of them. And so while Bonnie's away, I took this page out of her notebook. And I'm going to read it to you, okay? Don't tell her I said that. But first of all, a godly Titus 2 woman who sat Bonnie down and said to her, there are 3 specific choices that will give you a wonderful biblical start. Number 1, she said, decide that you will make your husband your number 1 most important human relationship in life over all others, including your parents, your brothers, your sisters, and your friends. Decide. She said, you've got to make a choice. If you want to fulfill what Paul told Titus to tell the church that is speaking to you today, you have to decide that you are going to make your husband your number 1 friendship in life. Higher than your mom you chum around with, and your sisters that you're so close to, and your brothers and your friends that you have cultivated all through life. Your husband moves in to the number 1 slot. Okay, that's a decision. Now, nothing's happened. He doesn't know anything about this. In fact, I didn't even know about this until much later. And I said, Bonnie, where'd you learn all this stuff? And she said, don't you remember when I used to go to tea over at Liz's house and she would talk to me? I said, mm-hmm. She said, well, this is what she taught me. Number 2, start to seek your husband's friendship and love ahead of all other human relationships, including your children. Start seeking your husband's friendship and love. You decided you're going to do it. Now start seeking it. Start seeking to be best friends. Now, we all have friends. We know how we do that. This relationship is phileo. It's not agape. It's not self-sacrificing. It's friendship. It's emotion. It's loving to be around them. Not doing what they tell you to do, but wanting to see them happy and pleased and rejoicing as your friend. And finally, the third one was begin examining your lifestyle and schedule to see if you are intentionally spoiling your husband rotten. That's a quote. It's right out of her notes. Spoiling your husband rotten. I know I'm rotten. I don't know if she spoiled me, but I'm rotten to the core, right? All of us were born that way, but you know what I mean by this. It means being really nice. If you are doing so as a way of life, then you can be sure that you are his best friend in truly loving your husband. So what she said is, you make this decision, decide he's going to be first, then you start intentionally cultivating that friendship, and then you start looking at your schedule and seeing if you, by your choices, by your priorities, by your habits of your everyday life, whether you're just saying that they're best friends or whether you just can't spend enough time together because you really are. Then she said, Bonnie, let me explain what you can do to maintain this high calling from God to love your husband. And I actually still have, I typed them, put them back, but I still have the actual notes Bonnie was given of simple, she said, here's 9 things that you need to do every day. And I looked at the page and it was all worn out. I think that must have carried around in her Bible for a long time. These truths worked, and they may help each of you in your love for your own husbands. Number 1, pray for your husband daily. If you love someone, you don't have to be reminded to pray for them. I remember early on, Bonnie used to ask me every morning, she said, tell me everything you're doing today because I'm going to pray for you all day long. And I'd think, okay. And I'd try and think of stuff, and when I came home, she'd ask me about all these things, and I'd say, what are you talking about? She said, well, those are the things in the morning that you told me to pray for. And I said, do you remember them? She said, oh, yeah. She said, I pray for you all day long. And I thought, wow, I don't pray for you all day long. Well, I need to do that. Number 2, plan for him daily things like special acts of kindness, special dinners, special times alone, special meals alone, early bedtime for the children, going to bed at the same time. Plan for him daily things. Isn't it? That's nothing. It's big. If your best friend is planning special things for you, you'll never forget that. That's the whole idea of this, becoming best friends. Number 3, prepare for him daily. Prepare your heart by being clothed with God's love. Prepare your house. Prepare your appearance. Prepare your greeting when he gets home. Set the table. Clear out all the visitors. Stay off the phone. Pray about his arrival. That was the third. That whole batch was the third thing. I remember when I used to come home. I remember that she actually appeared to be waiting for me. And when the kids got older, I can remember driving in and looking, and where I parked, there was a window, and it would be up. And I would see first one little head there, and then 2 years later, 2 little heads there, and then 2 years later, 3 little heads there. And I used to wonder, I asked for the longest time, I said, how come the kids are always looking out the window? And she said, because we prepare for you coming home. And do you know, that little tiny, you don't put a window in your house and put the kids' heads in it. It's not literally do that. It's find ways to prepare for him daily. If you're best friends, when you see that best friend, they light up when they see you. They go, how are you? Oh, I can't wait let's catch up. Does that characterize your marriage? Or is it, you're late? That is not a best friend greeting. And that comes with the clothe yourself with love, because I was late many times. Number 4, please him daily. It's not just praying and planning and preparing. It's actually find a way to please your husband. Something that makes him stop and say, thank you. That is so, how did you think of that? How did you know that, that is my favorite whatever? Or I wanted to go there or do that or see this or whatever. Number 5, protect your time with him. I remember that Bonnie wouldn't answer the phone when I came home. She said, I can talk all day long. I'm going to talk. I'm going to protect my time with you. People came to the door. She didn't even let them in. She opened the door. No, not right now. Protect the time with him. It's so short that we have time together. Number 6, physically love him. Let him know that you are available at any time that would please him. Tell him you are his girlfriend. Isn't it sad that the kids nowadays, that when they go to the mall, they're glued to each other? When they're driving in cars, young people are just, you just see one head in the car. But when you see married couples, they're, even if they don't have 4 children between them, they're looking opposite ways. They aren't even close enough if they stretched out to touch hands. It's like you go your separate ways. And you say, well, that's just the way marriage is. No, that's the way you made it. That's not the way God designed it. God designed it that you be cleaving, glued to one another. That you kind of start developing a little crick because you're always, having to walk so close to someone that you're holding their hands and your wrist starts, bending, and you get a little calcification there because you're always holding the hands. That's how God designed it to be, that you grow old, wearing out in the best friendship of all. Number 7, positively respond to him. I used to remember I'd come home and I'd say, hey, honey, they just asked me if I'd go and speak in Argentina. She said, oh, great. Really? But she got the positive response. Oh, great. How long are you going to be gone? But positive response. A man is like a balloon, and when he says something, if you poke him, if you immediately have a negative, that's a dumb idea. Just like that, and it takes him a long time to share another big thought with you because you're just poking. Now, I know on Facebook poking is positive, but in real life, poking is not positive if it's deflating and destroying him. Number 8, praise him. I know that's really hard for some people. But as I look back, every time I spoke, I would come out and Bonnie would have her notes and she'd have big stars on the top. She'd say, oh, that was the best I've ever heard. And I said, honey, it wasn't. I made some mistakes. No, it was the best. You know why? Because in her heart, she had decided that to obey, to be a grace-energized woman, she would love her husband. It was a conscious choice, not just in acts of self-sacrificing obedience, but with her emotions. And that's what Paul's talking about. Number 9, pray without ceasing for him. You know, I have a dear friend sitting right down here this morning who teaches, as you heard, advertised, Kurt's class, Love and Respect. You ought to go to that class sometime. He has this ka-ching thing he does. And every time a woman responds to her husband in a loving way and respecting him in his life, there's a reward God gives them in heaven, because it is so impossible at times. It's so against our culture to pray and plan and prepare and please and protect and physically love and positively respond and praise and pray for him without ceasing. But women are rewarded for such love poured out on their husbands. God commands us in Proverbs to be intoxicated by the love of our partner. If you are married and not intoxicated by the love of your partner, you are missing the best marriage possible. Go back and by God's grace rekindle the blessing, the edifying, the sharing, and the touching that always builds a strong, close, encouraging partnership. The greatest priority in a home should be love. If a wife loved her husband and her children, she was well on the way to making her marriage and her home a success. In our Western society, a man and woman fall in love and then get married. But in the world Paul wrote to Titus, in the Eastern culture, marriages were less romantic. They got married and learned to love each other. Probably the best scripture for a godly marriage that is energized by grace is right here in Titus 2, verses 3 and 4. Godly women, energized by grace, live as a priest for God. They have guarded tongues. They have no enslavements. They have visible integrity. And they earnestly mentor wives who are their husband's best friends. That will change the world around you as they see Christ reflected in you, fulfilling God's design for marriage of being glued together as best friends.